in this particular lesson, we're going to talk about critical points in more depth now. If you remember in previous lesson, we basically kind of informally defined that critical points is where the graph started changing directions. And so now we're going to kind of formalize that definition a little bit more. And you can see here some visual examples of different critical points, and we can tell from definition that those points are actually on the graph when a line is drawn tangent to the curve is either horizontal or vertical. Now we can have a visual representation of that down here below, and you can see in the first two where we go from increasing to decreasing or decreasing to increasing. If we draw a little dotted horizontal line that's tangent to the curve, that's representing the critical point. Now we also have a critical point where we could draw a vertical line, and you can see that in the third example. Now these critical points can be defined a little farther. We can call them maximums as being the highest point on the graph, minimums being the lowest, and the point of inflection you can see is where we take it and it creates a point of inflection as a point of origin, a point symmetry across a particular point. So this kind of defines our critical points a little bit farther. Now what we plan on doing in this particular lesson is just to kind of point out the different types of critical points that we can have, define them a little bit. I'm going to ask you to read through the notes a little bit more carefully and commit these things to memory. I'm just going to point out a few nuances about the individual points that we're dealing with. So first and foremost, we could be talking about minimums and maximums, and these minimum and maximums can actually be considered extremes or not extremes. And so if we're talking about extremes, or what we call in mathematics extremum, to get technical about it, you can have an absolute max or an absolute minimum value, meaning it is the absolute highest point on the graph. You can visually see that there's nothing higher than the given point. And you can see two visual examples of absolute minimums and absolute maximums in these given examples down here at the bottom of the page. Now we can also have what we call relative minimums and relative maximums, and these may not be the absolute highest or lowest points, but given over the value over a certain domain or a certain range of values, it is the greatest or smallest in that area. And so sometimes we call these local minimums and maximums, and sometimes the absolute minimums and maximums can be called relative as well, depending on what area of the graph you're looking at. And so we definitely want to kind of commit these to memory and just understand that different textbooks and different publishers will define these or refer to these a little bit differently, but they all pretty much mean the same thing. So take some time to go through these notes, read about the relative minimum maximum, the absolute minimum maximum, identifying points of inflection. Probably wouldn't hurt also to have just a short little Google search and visually see the representation of some of these and the differences and the little nuances from book to book. So in the next video, we'll take some time to actually go through and work some sample problems, but I just wanted to basically introduce you to a couple concepts. So definitely understanding that critical point is a tangent line where you can draw a tangent line horizontally or vertically, and understanding the difference between absolute minimum maximums and relative minimum maximums. So just use this as a little base of knowledge to work the sample problems, and also maybe do a little research on your own.